Right, guys, thanks for everybody that's here early. I think there's a few more that will be coming through as we get going, but I'd like to start on time. So just so you know, the session will be recorded. Yeah, we will also send out that recording back to everybody once we're done. So welcome to this Endeavour Live webinar. We'll be talking today about how we can manage the entire manufacturing business with one cloud-based solution called MYOB Advanced Manufacturing Edition. Hopefully it will take us only 45 minutes. And we're really excited to show this to you today. My name is Dreyer, and I will be your host today. I've been working in the ERP industry for over 15 years. A lot of that's spent with SAP and various other products. And Endeavour Solutions was established in 1988. We specialize in enterprise cloud software only. We also have a sister company in New Zealand, and we have over 350 customers in the mid-market running our enterprise solutions. I'm also joined today by the ever smiling and very experienced Tharanga Pereira, who's joining us from MYOB. Welcome, Tharanga.
Hi, Leo.
And I've also got Anna on the call. She'll be our moderator today. So thanks for joining, Anna.
No worries. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Last but not least, thank you to everybody that's taking time out of their day to join us. We trust that this next 45 minutes will be very insightful to all of you. Maybe just a few housekeeping rules before we get going. If you've got any question during this presentation, you might see a Q&A box either at the top or the bottom of your screen. Just hit that, ask us questions. We're going to try and get to all of those at the end. So we're going to go through the presentation and try and answer whatever we can. If there's any questions that we can't answer by the end, we will obviously reach out to you directly, or just pop us an email or give us a call. The session is recorded, and so you will be able to watch it afterwards. If you have to drop off early, that's no problem. You will still get the recording. Without further ado, let's get cracking. So what we will cover in the session today, I'll be touching on typical pain points which most manufacturers in Australia and New Zealand deal with, and how MYOB, and more specifically how our manufacturing edition in MYOB Advanced can actually address these. Tharanga will be taking us through a live demonstration of the product in which he will showcase you how we can improve visibility across all your production processes, from managing bill of materials, multiple production orders, production scheduling, even multiple entities, all in one cloud-based solution. So why change? Well, I think the time has never been more crucial for manufacturers in Australia to expand and streamline their operations. The manufacturing industry is seeing a massive resurgence at the moment. With the advent of COVID and also the trade war, there's a lot more commerce coming back, which also raises the competition locally, where there's a lot more manufacturers. And I do actually want to share with you guys, I don't know if you're aware, it's so much so that the Victorian government currently is even assisting small and medium manufacturers, expanding their businesses up to, I think, like $500,000. So you might hopefully see on the screen at the moment, this is just let me know if you can't see it. Yeah, Anna, can you guys see the screen?
Yep, I can see the screen.
Yes, we can. Thanks, Leo.
So you might be able to see here, and I'm happy to share this link with whoever is on the call and is in Victoria and will be eligible. But the government is busy giving out grants to a lot of businesses planning on expanding their businesses. So I think even the government has picked up that there's definitely a lot of change happening, and there's a big need to improve businesses locally and those who want to expand. Now, if that's not reason enough to at least review your processes, on screen you will see 11 frequently raised problems. These are typical questions we get asked by manufacturers that we engage with about things that they want to improve in their business or problems that they have. I'm not going to read through all of them, but I'd like to just give you some time to see if any of those actually resonate with you and your organization. While you kind of read through that, I think one of the ones that stands out for me and one I hear most often is people saying we just do not have enough insight into our stock levels and the cost of it. We don't understand, when we need to get the raw materials to have it just in time and not overcapitalize on stock. And just trying to understand where in the process my production orders are actually at, and trying to get a feel for where things are at and what you can promise back to the customers. So you will probably see in our session today, we'll cover most of these things in one solution and things that we can actually address. I'd like to quickly share with you the story of a local Australian manufacturer that is running MYOB Advanced for their business. This video might be a little bit sketchy because of the resolution and because we're doing a live webinar and I'm just replaying something that's on YouTube. But I'd like to send this to anybody afterwards if this doesn't come through. So I am just going to start this in a second.
We were almost operating in hindsight, and manufacturing cannot operate like that. My name is Karen Lebsampton. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Courage on Kitchen Wash. Courage on Kitchen began back in 1993 with myself and my husband. Team of two became a team of so many more. There was about 30 packets a week back then. Today, we bake 756,000 pieces of lavash every day, still baked with the same love and care as what we did. One of our main problems was the management of our inventory. It was being managed through spreadsheets, and that was not sustainable going forward. MYOB Advanced brought all of that together into one program to give us correct and accurate data that we could rely on. The ability of everybody to come to one software program has improved the productivity and output of information within the business. It's really important in food safety that we could access and recall data from batch coding, inventory management, from the moment a good was received in that was going to be baked in the process through to a customer receiving that on their plate. Everything is just automatically done at a click of a button. What a mock recall would take a long time, couple of hours, has brought it down into minutes. It's actually been given me the ability to take a step back from my business, not being immediately hands-on, with the confidence that my team has the right software, has the right program to deliver the information I'm requiring to strategize and grow this business. What MYOB Advanced has allowed us to do is to look at data in real time so that decisions can be made here and now when manufacturing needs it. It is reliable, it's accurate, and it's been a life changer for this business. We were almost operating.
There we go. Thank you for watching that. Hopefully the audio was fine there, and you could see what this product can mean for other businesses. I think a lot of you sitting there might be saying, it sounds great, but why are we even talking about MYOB? Aren't they for small businesses? Well, I'm not sure if you're aware, but MYOB is in fact the largest ERP solutions provider in Australia and New Zealand. Their three key products in the enterprise space have over 7,500 customers on, and these are all typical mid-sized businesses, and a lot of those also are manufacturers. So today we'll be focusing on the product called MYOB Advanced, and specifically the manufacturing edition of that product. So where does this come from? You might say, well, did MYOB build this, because they're only this company from Australia? I think the answer to that is yes and no. MYOB Advanced was introduced to the market in 2014 as the first true cloud ERP solution for ANZ. We currently have over 1,200 sites in Australia, New Zealand, customers like yourselves running the product. It's worth understanding that MYOB Advanced is a localized version of an international award-winning product called Acumatica. Acumatica is therefore then regionalized by MYOB, who's got the rights to make it to Australianify it almost, So what they do is they've got the rights to rebrand it in Australia as MYOB Advanced and put an Australian spin on it, meaning they obviously make the product suit our industry around payroll, super, GST, all the things that are unique to Australia, but you get obviously a global product that grows with global enhancements where the world's going with machine learning and AI. So all those improvements at a global level, but with an Australian flavor. So it truly is unique in what it offers. It offers payroll as well as workforce management, which we will get into. So the product in MYOB Advanced is a fully integrated ERP product. So everything is integrated in one solution, from finance, inventory, customer management, sales, purchasing, project accounting, potentially even field services, as well as manufacturing, all sitting in one product with the financial module at the core. And it's also browser based. So you only need an internet connection and any browser to work on the product. So let's take a closer look at the manufacturing edition. So through our experience, we've worked with multiple different manufacturers, and these are just some of the industries that we actually serve. MYOB Advanced, with the product we'll be looking at today, comes into its own with discrete type of manufacturing, where we would take a certain bunch of raw materials and then produce a final product. And I can see on the call that we have a lot of people here from, machine makers or industry engineering for the food industry, fencing, powder coaters and people like that, people just doing assemblies as well. And the product will pretty much cater for all of those. And we'll be happy to discuss your detail afterwards if that's of any importance. On the screen is a typical workflow. Although the solution is not limited to only these, all of these functional inputs are not necessarily required for the solution to work, but it's to give you a bit of an idea of all the different steps you would typically go through in your organization and what the system will take into account. And on the side, you might see a very small little screen, but that is all just to show you that we also have shop and production floor data. Now, this data can be collected and scanned into the system from a mobile device, and most likely we'll be able, time permitting, to show that to you as well today. The manufacturing edition is made up of many sub-modules. There's 6 of them, and I think in this specific demonstration, we'll focus at the top 3, because those are what we would consider the core. It's good to understand that all these modules are included. None of them is an optional add-in or anything you have to purchase. It's a matter of whether we switch it on or not, but we will focus on the top 3 today. So let's cover off those 3 key modules a little bit more. So for bill of materials, it allows you to obviously manage the definition of a product. Some people I know still keep these things in Excel and have their very secret recipes. The product obviously have encryption, and you would need to load a bill of material in order for the system to work. But this kind of defines the framework for that product, how you will produce it, what material you need, how much of that material you need, the steps or the routing that it goes through in terms of getting there, and any other overheads that you want to actually add into it. This we will cover a lot today in the demo, and Tharanga will take us through that. So I won't steal his thunder. Secondly, just looking at production management, this is where you can control and track the manufacturing process. So managing schedules to meet delivery dates. You'll be able to schedule your production orders to ensure that you meet the demands. It caters for multiple costing methods. It can include serial and batch numbers or lot numbers with expiry dates as well, and with alerting around that. We can also backflash raw materials in our processing so that the system automatically assumes that it's used those raw materials to produce a final product, or you can manually issue things into production. I'm not going to cover that into detail, but it's just to give you a bit of an idea of what that part of the solution can cater for. And then the third core component that we would see is what we call material requirements planning. Now, this is kind of the brains of the operations, because this can explode through the bill of materials. So if you've got multiple level bill of materials, the system can explode through it and get to the actual raw material, whether you purchase that or whether it's a sub-assembly that you produce. The system will then be able to give you forecast on that based on sales orders and any other inputs that we have, to tell you how much of a product you should be purchasing today or making today in order to meet that demand. So on the screen here, you'll see a very quick visual of what the MRP kind of takes into account. So there's a lot of different input data that gets taken into account. It compares it based on the demand that you have as well as the supply. It matches it off, and then based on EOQs, minimum order quantities, all these different types of elements, it will take that into account and tell the user, this is what we recommend you should purchase or buy today or make. Now, obviously, a human still needs to review that recommendation, because you might know of very specific things that the machine won't know, but it's to automate that process so that you could just review it and by a click of a button, fire off purchase orders to your suppliers or create the production orders. Just some of the other modules. This is just other functionality that's already in the product. We won't cover this necessarily in this demonstration today, but these these functionality is part of the product, and we could obviously include that in very specific industries. Some of these are more required than others, but we just don't see them as core necessarily because we don't roll them out everywhere. But please get in touch with us or drop a comment in the questions if you've got anything you've seen thus far. I know it's quite quick, but I really do want to get to the demonstration, which is really the core of this meeting. So I think without further ado, I'm going to try and hand over, if all goes well, the session to Tharanga, who will become the host for the next few minutes. And he will be taking us through MYOB Advanced Manufacturing in real life. Now, just worth noting while we try and switch over the controls, we will be demonstrating this as if you're kind of a little bit familiar with the product, because we'll be focusing on the manufacturing side. So just bear that in mind. If you do want just an overview of the product in MYOB Advanced, then yeah, just please get in touch with us as well. All right, Tharanga, I think you should be the host right now, and hopefully you'll be able to share your screen.
Okay, let's give it a go. Let me know once you can see the screen.
Yep, I can see it, mate. All good.
Oh, good. Okay, great. Okay, so you should be able to see a dashboard of sorts. This is the production manager dashboard, just confirming. All good. Welcome, everybody. So in the next 30 minutes or so, I'll hope to run through sort of the end-to-end workflow in MYOB Advanced, specifically to do with manufacturing. But I'll just like to point out now I'm logged in to the system using a browser. So this is all browser enabled. It's native to the cloud. And basically, any device which you have access to a browser, you can basically log in from anywhere in the world. So I'm using Google Chrome for today's demonstration. And basically, I've logged in as Michael Andrews to this system. And he is typically, I'm assuming he's the production manager for this hypothetical example. They're in the business of manufacturing bicycles and sub-assemblies related to that. So I'm going to run through a typical example of that. But before I do, I just want to, for those who may not have had some familiarity with Advanced, just briefly run through what you'll be greeted as part of this user interface. So typically, once you log in, you will see a dashboard typically set up for that user role. These are highly configurable depending on the type of user. And you can see different alerts, dashboards, and charts. And you can basically take action as soon as you log in. You can see all the exceptions which you need to manage. So if you go into a different type of dashboard, like manufacturing dashboard, it gives more detail in terms of scrap analysis and late production orders and such. And also any open orders as such.
And Tharanga, is that something easy for users to edit after they've started using the product?
Definitely, once they get used to it, they have ability to design their own dashboards depending on. So typically that would be limited to the super users. We don't want everybody changing the dashboards, but typically you can. And basically, Advanced makes use of something known as generic inquiries, where we use a lot of these inquiry screens or grid sort of structures, which basically can be created by the users, and they in turn can be translated into these widgets or dashboards, basically. So it's very user friendly, and if you're used to Excel, it has basically the same functionality as Excel in terms of filtering and so on.
And those are real time, right? So they are refreshing how often, whenever you need that.
Oh, you can basically set up the refresh, or you can just force the refresh as well. So you can set it up as in part of the dashboard design as well.
Yep.
Good question. So in terms of the UI, I'll be using this search bar on top basically to interface with the system without having to memorize the menu structures or locating things. So if I'm, say, after a bill of material screen, I can just, if I can type correctly, I can basically say bill, and basically any menu item which uses that keyword pops up, and you can basically home in on that. You can also use that search bar to basically search any transactions as well. So let's say type ABC. If there's a customer named ABC or a transaction referring to that, you can basically look that up as well. So this is the universal search, which does help you save time trying to look up items. It's quite user-friendly in that regard. You do, failing that, you can basically use the workspaces on the right, which are also configurable depending on what you want to show. So you can expand the workspace depending on what you're after as well. Not only that, you can notice that I've starred a few, which is basically it's basically favorites. So basically you can have your frequently accessed items for your own personal workspace, which is just for yourself. So there's a couple of ways you can interact with the system. Okay, so what I want to do now is basically jump into a stock item record. Let's make that a bit bigger so that you can probably see that. So in terms of, before I dive into the actual workflow, I just wanted to say, so this is basically a bicycle, the stock item for this bicycle which you're selling as part of your operation. So this is a manufactured item. We can set up different valuation methods for this particular item as well, including, and these settings are also relevant for your raw materials and sub-assemblies as well. So keep that in mind. We can also track this if you are interested in tracking by lot number or serial number, or even expiry dates. If you're in that kind of business, you can basically track raw materials by those particular attributes.
And on that question, I think a lot of people, and I think people that are relevant on this call as well, they might be tracking batch numbers or lot numbers on their raw material and not on the final product.
Yes.
But to understand, Tracer, do you have the option to split that final product versus raw material?
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. So basically, this is the final product, but if you look at a raw material item, you can basically track that in a different methodology as well. So it's highly configurable in that regard. Not only that, you can also set different units of measure, which is, in this case, I'm looking at the finished good, but even for raw material, you might be getting metal in lengths or meters. So and depending on the supplier, you can set up multiple units of measure depending on that. So in this case, I've assumed that we're going to sell bicycles, but you might group them in a box of 6. You can basically do that as well. So similar methodologies for raw materials as well.
And you can obviously then do pricing and stock takes by those different units of measure as well, right? To
Correct.
make things simpler.
Correct.
Yep.
And you can also do the barcoding based on that as well. So you can basically have a barcode for the box as opposed to single item.
Yep.
So we have multiple tabs. I'm not going to go through all of them, but basically relevant for manufacturing would be sort of setting up your default bill of materials. Having said that, it'll default to 1, but you can set up multiple versions of that, which I will show you shortly. You can also default the scrap locations, also how it's the behavior of the item in terms of the default for production or for is it for purchasing. You can set all of that up. And also Leo mentioned about MRP, which is which is the brains of the system. So you can basically tag it whether it should be planned for MRP purposes. And also you can set up the lot sizes, lead times at a high level in terms of these replenishment settings as well. So you can basically cater to your requirements.
And that safety stock is something you'll probably use if you do a make to stock, right? When it's not configured to order type material, correct?
Correct. You can do it either way, but mainly for stock items which you would create for sub-assemblies, which you would use on a day-to-day basis, correct?
Sure.
Okay, so I'll jump into an actual bill of materials. If I jump into this. Leo, if you could confirm you can see the pop-up screen.
I can see the pop-up.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yep. So this is a typical bill of materials layout. So in our system, basically we have the routing and the bill of materials and the consumptions all in one page. So if you look at it on the top half, it's basically the header, which refers back to the inventory, which you just saw. You can also, in the middle half is middle section, basically, you can see the routing, the different work centers and the different the sequence of operations it'll run through. And also each of these workspaces will have its own material consumption at the bottom. And that's what I've tagged in at the bottom here. So it's using its own inventory. And all of this can be multi-level as well. So for example, the wheel might have its own bill of materials in this case. So that's where it'll explode the BOM out for multi-level purposes. So yeah, you can manage that. So also, you can also see there's steps as well. So you can document any instructions which are required as part of your bill of material. You can also use the system as basically centralized storage for any sketches, drawings, attachments as well. So for example, I've attached a picture of a sketch which you might use, and it's centrally stored, so you don't have to you store it on different systems as you go through it. So if I go back.
It's a beautiful bike, by the way.
That's our bread and butter in this case. So for the other aspect is you can also keep track of tools used for each work center, and you can actually capture cost in terms of usage. The other extension of this would be it can keep a count of the number of times it's been used in production, especially relevant if you use molds or dyes, which have a useful life.
Fantastic.
As well.
Yeah, that's good.
So you can extend that. You can also track overheads as well. If you want to go to that detail, you can
like
track
electricity or anything else.
Yeah, rent, flow space. Yeah, and you can vary that and drive that cost based on an output measure as well, which is configurable. The other aspect is if I just quickly jump into one of these work centers, each work center can be driven by either the machine capacity or the crew size, mainly if it's labor driven. So you can set up efficiencies and such as well if you want to go to that level. Again, you can tag machines, which has its own cost attributed to that. So the part which you're not covering today is like in MYOB Advanced, for those who are aware, has very extensive GL and finance reporting capabilities. And that's where you see that you can break that up into accounts and sub-accounts depending on the cost structure which you want to track. So you can do that to that level as well. Okay, and also you have the ability to backflush materials and labor. So depending on to make the production process simpler, rather than issuing every single item, you can basically backflush, meaning automatically all these materials will be issued as you move through each operation. Yeah. But if you're doing serial tracking, as you mentioned, you might not have backflush. You would basically issue materials as you scan through and issuing it to each production order. So you got best of both worlds. Okay, so that's just an overview in terms of the BOM or bill of material structure. Also, you notice here revisions. So I mentioned earlier, you can capture multiple revisions and you can set up expiry dates and sort of a date range where it's valid for. You also have the ability to create what is known as ECRs or engineering change requests and related change orders. So basically to keep track of revisions as it goes through and can tie it to a approval workflow as well. So if you have a separate team of engineers who need to sign off on these bill of materials, you can basically keep track of that as part of revision control of bill of materials.
So if you've got multiple revisions, would you be able to create a production order for any one of those?
Yes, correct. And you can basically, as long as it's active, yes, but you can also make multiple revisions inactive or archive them as well.
Fantastic.
Not in memory. So, and you asked about revisions. The other key features, if you have multiple revisions, you might want to compare what's changed. So in this case, I have pulled up a similar BOM, but basically subtle changes in it too. So if I look at this material, I can see it highlights what's different and also where it's changed. So in this case, between revision A versus B, I have changed the consumption of that as well as the cost as well. So you can basically home in on changes immediately. So that's a couple of features we have to make life easier to manage that. Okay, so now I will actually go to the workflow side of the operation. So basically, typically this will be done by the sales team. Maybe you can manage from a lead flow perspective. You get a lead from a customer, you convert that to an opportunity, and from then on, you might create a quote for this customer. And then if that's accepted, we'll go through the sales process and through the production process. So I thought I'd start with this. So that typically you don't need to re-enter information again and again. So all of this is integrated to the manufacturing process. So for example, in this opportunity, we've already had an inquiry for 10 bicycles. We populated that. So in this stage, you might create a quote, for example, and send it off to the customer. Or if assuming it's all accepted, we can basically create a sales order from here.
And you don't have to necessarily use the opportunities, right? That is like a CRM function if you track that, but you can just do a quote or an order. Or...
Correct, yes.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of integrations in advance which we integrate. So one is the CRM part, and also if you're in projects as well, so you might be tracking large scale projects, you can basically trigger production orders from there as well. So there's a couple of integration points where it does flow seamlessly through. So again, this is the sales order. So it'll basically look at the pricing, the discounting, and so on. So, and from here, you can basically save that at this point. I can basically release this to production. So I can create a production order related to this sales order. Let's say I want to create 10 bicycles. I hit create.
The process you're obviously taking us through, Tharanga, is a linear one where you say, okay, one order comes in, we now produce it. But we can obviously do bulk processing as well if there's a bunch of sales orders to then create.
Correct. And so one of the options is at this stage, rather than doing, for example, this might be an urgent order which needs to be pushed into production immediately. And basically I've done that. I've created a production order and then I can follow through on that. The other option is actually using MRP as well. So in terms of, you run the MRP cycle maybe daily or a couple of times a day. And this is the MRP display basically. So it'll tell you what we need to manufacture depending on the pending sales orders. And it'll look at the date when it's requested, it'll run through that process. And also it'll explode the BOM based on its on the raw material or sub-assemblies which you need to purchase or manufacture. So this is where the MRP really comes into play. It'll keep tracking all your documents from end to end, with it be a sales order or a planned order as such. And you have the option of taking action within the screen as well. So you can basically highlight what you need to be purchased, or for example, if Leo mentioned, you have multiple entities, multiple warehouses, for example, which you can transfer from if they have stock. And also you can basically purchase as well if you require to create a purchase order from certain suppliers. And you notice some of these items have a preferred supplier attached to it, so you don't have to key in that information again. It'll basically open up a PO ready for you to go using this functionality. So this is where basically everything gets sort of streamlined in the system. So going back to our sales order, I've created a sales order for 10 bicycles. Now I've created a related production order for that. So if I jump into that production order, it would now be in a planned status, and I'll shortly release that. But you can see that the dates are all inherited from the sales order. It also retains the references back to the sales order as well, so that you can always track it back and forth. So the production team knows where it's originating from and reprioritize accordingly. You also have the references back to the bill of materials which it's using as well. So you can see
as
that.
well as the revision.
Yeah. And like I mentioned, the project. So if you're tagging this to longer term projects, for those who are in that sort of industry, you can basically tag that as well in here. So at this point, I will probably release this order because I just want to follow through that work process. Now it's in release status. So for example, if you're using MRP, you can basically see all the shortfalls in terms of raw materials. But in case you want to have a quick look, you can also use the critical materials. So you can basically jump in here and see any material which are short on hand. So in here, you can see all the materials which we require, which are actually short because we can't probably produce in full at this stage. But you can basically view and take actions in this screen as well, similar to what we did in MRP.
So in an estimate, if you were to do manufacture for to a specific product, if you do manufacturing to stock, I would imagine that should be as blank as possible.
Ideally, yes.
Ideally, but obviously if you do more configurable products, then obviously this will show you all the bits that needs to be purchased.
Correct. Correct. And interesting that you mentioned configuring, because we do have a separate configurator, but that's not part of today's demo, but we have that option as well. Okay, so I'll jump into that production order again. I'll show you a couple of other high-level elements of that. So if you jump into the totals, you can see the total plan cost based on that bill of materials. And as we run through the operations, these actual costs will start populating as the work in progress follows through each operation. So for this aspect, so what I can do is I can also generate a production ticket. So if you're actually using a traveler or a job sheet on the factory floor, you can basically use this as the sheet. So it's all tied back to that production order with barcodes. And you can basically use data capture either manually, or you can use the app, which I'm about to show you as well. So just bear with me for a second till I get my...
Just while you're busy with that, I think a lot of people that I've worked with in the past, a lot of the processes that they happen often at that station, they would actually pre-print these off and have certain labels obviously laminated and just easy and ready to go. It's just the product or the actual order that changes. But you can scan off screen. You don't have to necessarily scan off a...
which I'm going to do at the moment. So I'm going to actually scan it off the screen. So if I jump into the app, so this is basically the app, which is included as part of the solution, which is available on the App Store for Android or Apple or any device which has a camera, basically. So one thing I'll just digress is basically all the dashboard which I showed at the beginning are also accessible using the app as well, and it's updated in real time as well, so you can have access. So anybody, any employee who has access to the system can access it using the app as well. So in this case, I'm going to, so for related to manufacturing, we're going to scan materials in. So I'm going to that option here. So you can basically use any device. So you don't have to purchase any special devices. You can use any device with a camera which can run this. You can basically use that as a barcode scanner. So I'm going to scan so I'm going to open the barcode scanner, and I can basically scan production order, and it'll prompt, and you can notice if I just point there, so I can basically see it'll prompt what the next step is. So I need to scan the next operation, in this case, the preparation of frame or cutting the initial tubing for this bicycle. Then it will basically prompt me to scan the warehouse. I'm not sure how it's coming up on the screen. It might be a bit sketchy.
Yep, no, we can see it. It's all good.
Cool. So I can scan the warehouse. We do have ability to have bin locations as well. So it'll prompt for the actual location so that we actually issue the right material. And then the barcode of the item, which is that one, the tube. So automatically it has defaulted to, you can basically set the quantity as well, but in this case, it's defaulting to what's required for this order. And basically at this stage, I can save that transaction, and the person using can release it to this production order. So basically, this is the step you might take when you're actually issuing the material to the
so Tharanga, I think one of the things that people have often is that there's people planning the production orders at the back office, but there's no data being collected as it goes through the process. So people know it's being built, but we don't know kind of where it is at. The idea behind this is either using obviously the app or any other device, whether it's a laptop or an iPad, to walk around and actually have data being collected as it happens.
Correct. Yeah, and you can see now, if you go focus attention back into the events history of this production order, that scan materials is now updated. So I've logged in as Andy Taylor in my system. It's Andy Taylor, yep, it is. So that's the transaction which has now updated this production order in real time. And you can see the total of that material cost has also got updated for this production order. So you can see that flowing through. In addition to that, you can use that traveler, the barcoded traveler, to actually also capture your movements between operations as well. Furthermore, you can also capture labor time. If you are interested in capturing actual time spent on a certain operation, you can basically clock in. So if I jump into one existing, I can basically clock in, clock out as well. Just give it a moment to load up. It's still catching up, I think. It's just my phone. There you go. So you can basically do a clock in, clock out of that. There you go. You can see a button at the bottom. So you can clock in and start that timer, and then it'll attribute that time back to the production.
You can obviously then accrue some of that cost as well as part of an overhead.
Exactly. As you go, rather than an overhead. Yeah.
Okay.
It's perfect. So I'll drag that out of the way. I've just given a tease of what the app can do. And also, if inventories are quite important for manufacturers, so I'm thinking also for stock taking, also you can use the app as well to maintain inventory, stock takes, and also receive and put away functions as well. Just worth mentioning.
I think just on that topic, for those that don't know, we do have multiple warehouse management solutions we can integrate with as well, and use obviously very specific scanners should that be required. But this is just, the light version that comes with the product, which can do a lot of features already.
Correct. Yeah. Okay, so I'm not going to run through the entire process, but I'll just jump into the detail of this production order. And as we mentioned before, we can track the status of it running through each of these operations. So you can see now that we issued some material, it's in process. And as it's completed, we can track through each operation as it completes completes each of the work in progress items. One thing I did want to mention was, like, let's say you have, subcontracting for, like, say, what we term as outside processing. So you have the ability to track that as well in terms of creating a purchase order for that subcontractor from within this production order. So you have that ability to track what's actually at that subcontractor once it's issued, and also what's been returned back into your production for completion.
Fantastic.
So I thought I'll mention that. So in terms of the production workflow, this will go end to end. The other aspects I just want to touch on briefly is the capacity planning element of the system as well. So you can schedule all your orders. For example, this is called rough planning. So you can schedule it a number of times as a planning order, and based on the priority of your sales orders. So basically, you can set that up, and you can also view the capacity utilization as well. So in terms of the work centers, which I've shown before, like the assembly, inspection, painting, and so on, you can see how much has been scheduled. So we use a term called blocks, which is configurable depending on the lowest common denominator you might use to keep track of your capacity, and you can basically have a sort of overview of what the utilizations is, or if it's bottleneck. So you can do this at a machine level as well, and even a cruise level as well. So if you want to, but yeah, typically you look at it as a work center. I think I've given a sort of a whirlwind tour of the manufacturing at this stage. So I think we can open up for any questions.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Tharanga. I'm just going to take back those. I think for those who's on the call, feel free to drop a question in the Q&A box while we've got Tharanga on the call, who obviously he's got his wealth of experience. So we're good to tap into his brain if there's anything you want to know about the product or any other customers or anything like that. We've got Anna, obviously, she's just going through all the questions and some of the comments that's going through. So Anna, if you maybe want to come off mute and just let me know if you've got any questions there for us to answer so long.
Thanks, Leo. Thanks, Tharanga. That was really good. It's good to go through that. Okay, so we've just had a couple of questions come through, which I think we've got time to cover. So if we can go through that. One of the ones I've got here is how many actual levels of the BOM can be catered? So how many sub-levels?
There's actually, from the system standpoint, there's probably no limit, but we've tested it up to about 20, 21 levels and without any issues. So we can go up to, I haven't seen the need to go up to that level, order levels, but typically we'd probably start at 3 or 4, 5. We also have the ability to have phantom BOMs as well, so which basically compresses your BOM to manageable level as well. So we have multiple ways of handling that. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Good. Oh, here's another good one. So we use CAD for our drawings, and the person who has posted this was wondering whether that CAD design could be imported in as a BOM.
So there's nothing out of the box, but we do have quite a number of ISVs or add-ons as part of the advanced solutions. One of which does support this interaction with CAD systems, multiple CAD systems. Basically, it'll integrate back to your bill of materials, which I showed you in the system, so that all of that can be sucked in using the CAD system and this intermediary solution to talk to back and forth, and basically it'll update it. Yeah. So we can definitely introduce that as part of the solution.
So that, Tharanga, just to clarify, they will actually create the actual bill of material and the sub-assemblies and all the raw materials from the CAD drawing, right?
Correct.
Fantastic.
And I think just for me to expand on that particular question, you did show that you had various versions of the BOM as well. So I guess just going back to your point, that it is possible as the CAD drawings are revised, that you can actually set a current version of that BOM, can't you?
Correct. It'll complement the revision control which you have in the system. Correct.
Yeah, yes. Which is great. That's good. Okay, so here's another one just about the BOM and management of the BOM, about doing global changes, or I guess what we would call substituting components across the board.
Okay. Yes. So we do have a mass change option. I don't know if I'm still sharing my screen.
Yeah, your screen is still up, I think.
So yeah, so in case I'm using, for example, the cycle, I can basically change that to the new inventory ID. So you can basically change that across multiple BOMs. So we have that function built in as part of the bill of materials. Yeah.
Okay, great.
I think that's very useful. I think that's something that happens often, especially once you start changing trading partners, or you might be buying local as opposed to foreign.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, and there's also, depending on how long the company's been trading for, products get replaced with newer technology and things like that. So it is important to be able to substitute right across the board.
I think just while we're talking about that, I don't know if that's even, has come up, but I thought just to maybe mention for those who do trade with international trading partners, the product fully supports foreign currencies. So you could purchase in multiple currencies. The system can automatically translate it for you. And we also have a landed cost feature. So any duties and freight and things that happens, you can actually apply to the cost of the goods, so that all sits as part of the cost of goods sold instead of just as an operational expense below the line. So it's something that's actually quite useful, and the system can deal with like realized exchange gains and losses. So just worth noting that. Is there something else, Anna? Maybe
I think there's two more questions, but I think this one might be quite good. So the question is about being able to see when products will be ready. So perhaps it's even at sub-assembly level as well as the finished component, I guess, to be able to get back to the customer to be able to say this is when our manufacturing will be.
Yeah, so some people might be familiar with this. It's like the capable to promise to the customer. So that's a functionality called CTP, which is coming up in the new release, which is just a few weeks away. So keep in mind, MYOB Advanced, we do have 2 major releases as part of our product update. So we do introduce new features as we go through the year. So this is actually one of the features which is coming up, which allows you in the sales order screen, which I showed you earlier, to actually quote a date, and basically it'll plan in the background and make sure that you can actually commit to that date based on the supplies coming through, and it'll update the dates accordingly. So that's called the CTP function, but yeah, it's definitely there. It'll be there in the new release coming up in a few weeks. So definitely something that we can meet.
And I have another one that's just popped up. It's, can it handle customer supplied stock on the BOM as well as our own internal stock? So I guess we may have a situation where a customer might provide something that we then need to do some more manufacturing on that. So would we need to potentially set up the customer as a supplier? Is that how that would work?
That's possible, because we can treat accounts as suppliers as well as customers. That's not a problem. We probably need to understand a bit more on what they're tracking in terms of the customer stock. But on the face of it, there's no limitation as far as it's.
Yeah, I think that potentially refers to consignment stock. I'm not too sure. We obviously need to
understand the context.
But potentially we can handle consignment stock in the system. There's ways to deal with that. If that is what that refers to, where you haven't yet had to pay for it, or the customer supplies that portion of it, you need to track it without it affecting costs or things on your end. So yeah, we probably just need to understand a bit better. I think we'll be in touch afterwards if you're okay with that, just to understand that, unless the question has been answered for you. So yeah,
I think we'll get back to our questionnaire. Is that how you call it? Do we have time for one more last one, Tharanga?
Sure.
Yep. So this one's around the actual client using MYOB, having multiple companies, and they purchase goods from between the different companies. How would this be handled as intercompany trading?
Yeah, so we do have the ability. I mean, in this case, I've set up multiple companies. And you can set up intercompany cross-selling as well. So there's some functionality around that where you can actually create a purchase order and it'll relate back to a sales order and so on. So there's ways of configuring that in the system.
Okay. Okay, that's good.
We can handle multi-entity transactions. Yes.
Great. Okay, that's great.
All right, fantastic.
Right.
So I think what I'll do, if for those who've got more questions, I think feel free to pop them in, or just pop us an email afterwards. We will definitely get back to that. I think we'll just want to quickly do a quick wrap up for you, and hopefully you can see the screen. Just let me know, Tharanga, can you see that there?
Yes, I can see the summary screen.
Yeah, okay, awesome. All right, so I think just a quick recap before we end. Just wanted to kind of make sure kind of what we learned today. I think one of the first things is, we obviously have the ability to manage the bill of material in quite a deep level, and a lot of different combinations of that. With this manufacturing edition, you'll be able to monitor and streamline that process in the manufacturing side of it as well. So within that production order process, there are lots of ways you can automate certain steps, Some of those we've done a little bit manually today, but obviously you can be as efficient as you need to. And sometimes if, you know, tracking how you automate things is not always the same. And I'm just on the side of mine, I just saw another question come in, so we'll just maybe circle back to that afterwards. So one of the other things we learned today is just about you'll be able to determine how much things will cost on the final side of it, as well as the raw material. Lots of different costing methods we can use, and also being able to manage your margins should those things move. That's something we haven't touched on so much, but having accurate costs in the system and potential real-time pricing, we can obviously do those kind of alerts. You'll also be able to produce enough finished goods to support that demand based on using MRP and things like that. And since the manufacturing edition is not a standalone product, or it's not an Excel part of the ERP system, all of these processes automatically flows through to the financial backend, which means it's all sitting in one product. So so thanks everybody for your attendance.